because I showed you this morning one of our most recent examples, We Monster, which is our social networking game for reforestation. I just wanted to give you kind of a little bit of background context on to some other projects that we've been working on that are slightly different. So the first one I want to talk about is a project called Red Mist, which is a youth violence anger management game. And the interesting thing about this one is it uses external technology called NeuroSky. And NeuroSky is like a brain sensor technology. And what we're doing with this is we're using the brain sensor technology to allow the game player to use their emotions to control the game. So basically it's a prison-based game where when you need to get to the next level and you're being provoked by a gang, you have to stay calm in order to progress into the next level. So the technology at this stage it's quite simple. It only detects a couple of emotions, but we think over time this will become a lot better. So we've got a prototype in, well, a concept and prototype stage at the moment. And then if I just roll the video, I've just got a small 1-minute clip to show you. And I have to point out, it says Digital 2.0 at the end because we've just rebranded to Playmob. Sorry for the confusion. So basically, the point of Red Mist is to get out of prison rather than a kind of Grand Theft Auto get into prison. So we flip that one on its head. The other example I want to just tell you about quickly is we've been working with a university in Essex, in London. And we've been working with the Human Rights Department, who have been putting together a concept for a game about slave trades and slave reparations. So this is it's an educational game which is basically to be used in like museums and universities and schools. Again, in prototype stage at the moment. But if we can just have the video for the slave trade game. Basically, as part of a project to show how the game could be looked, the university were trying to raise funding to be able to develop the whole game. So they wanted something interactive and visual, so we've got an interactive version of this that they can take out and show to people, and also just the short video which they were able to kind of take it forward as part of a business case to try and raise the funding to take it to the next level. So I just wanted to show you that, just to kind of give an example of the different types of projects that we've been involved in. So even though we have a reforestation game, we have other areas that we work on. We worked with the subject matter experts and people who have the content and know about the issue, and wrap this content into fun and engaging gameplay and use platforms that make sense for the audience that they're trying to reach out to. So I hope that gives you a flavour of what we do, and I'll pass you on to our next speaker.
Thanks, Jude. David?
Good afternoon again. As I said before, I represent a nonprofit organization based here in Washington called One Economy Corporation. And to reiterate, we're about 11 years old, and we've been using, over the past 11 years, technology and various aspects of it and various platforms to really distribute good, sound information and resources in a variety of fundamental topics that stand to improve people's lives, from economic livelihood to health care, education, employment, housing, and so on. And principally, we've been delivering that content in a web-based format over the years, but increasingly, we've been developing content in new formats, including the mobile platform. Most recently, we launched a program called Applications for Good. This launched just earlier this year, and the notion behind Applications for Good, you can go into the next one, is really about both developing ourselves, but more importantly, facilitating the development of applications, web applications, mobile applications. Thank you. That are in the public good, that have a public purpose. We refer to them as public purpose apps as a result. And so we do have web developers on our team, and we are working on some mobile applications. But really, again, our role is to help facilitate this development, and you see a few of those phases of that process here through our Applications for Good site, through contests that we sponsor. We're just wrapping up one right now, co-sponsored by AT&T. We've got this ideation process to help percolate up important community needs, and then a real collaborative process, both online as well as through codathons or hackathons that we conduct. We just finished up 3 of those recently in 3 different cities, and then through actual development of apps ourselves. The ideation part is where One Economy really sees its biggest benefit in the Applications for Good program. Again, we've got many relationships with low-income populations, communities, and nonprofits working in those communities all over the country, and what we really want to do is take a lot of time to help percolate up as specifically as possible really important community needs, to get the juices flowing of developers, mobile and otherwise, to get them thinking about solving real problems and problems that people are asking to have solved, not just sort of start with a blank slate. So that's a big part of what we're dealing with. If you could advance to the next slide, please. In sort of the gaming space, what we've been talking about in the codathons and what we've been hearing back is really 3 different things, and you've seen some of those earlier today, and we'll be talking about more of them today, but sort of the fundraising model where any game can sort of have a donation engine either embedded directly in the game or encouraging that type of behavior sort of associated with the game in more of an ad model is one model being looked at. Another one, which I'm sure Derek is going to talk about, is sort of the play and learn model. You know, the educational game in and of itself, there's things going on that, within the game where you're learning lessons, but then there are also things where the games themselves, much like we heard Jude talk about, sort of are games first, but speak to more overarching social issues. So that's the play and learn category. And then the third, using sort of game mechanics to white label game development for folks like other nonprofit organizations. We're working with Goodwill, for example, to work on a project where we take game mechanics and help them develop their own game around the messaging and the issues that they want to bring to the fore, just using some basic game mechanics, throwing a ball, wall falling over, those sorts of things. If you'll advance to the next slide, please. This is some stats that you undoubtedly can't read from where you're sitting, but the important thing to take away from this is that there have been a lot of studies showing the target population that One Economy focuses on, most primarily low-income populations and minority populations, are really outpacing other populations in this country in use of mobile data and mobile applications, including gaming platforms. And that's encouraging to us in the work we do, that says, yes, indeed, the mobile platform is a relevant platform to help us do the work that we're trying to do. Next slide. There's a couple of short videos here. We won't watch all of both of them, but at one of our recent codathons, we had a couple of groups come and sort of expand their thinking around a couple of things that they're working on that I thought fell nicely into the topic for today. These are both in the health realm. The first one, Tap Cloud, if you're going to show that video for a second, I think that's a really quick one. Tap Cloud obviously takes interactive, out in the environment type of approach to exercise, giving people an incentive to go out there and play this game that they play through the camera on their mobile device and count calories while they're doing it. The second one, the video is going to be actually from one of our codathons and showing a short presentation of this group that brought this app for further development in the codathon. Very similar vein to Tap Cloud, but I thought this was a fantastic idea. We'll just show a little bit of this video.
Hello everyone, how are you doing today?
Hi.
We're here from Portland, Oregon. We were going to do this in Portland, Oregon, but we found ourselves in San Francisco instead.
The video's not playing there, obviously.
So there's this problem. Whenever you see these awesome athletic people and there's all these ads.
All right, you can pause it. I'm going to describe it for you. The visual is not that impressive. It's someone talking. So the game is called Point Runner, and the basic idea here is turning yourself into Pac-Man in a sense. You basically go online first, map out a course that you want to run on a GPS map. And using the GPS device, GPS enabled on your phone that you take with you when you're on your run, it marks when you're entering in the different points along your route along the way, and you gather up points as you hit each one of those milestones. So it turns your actual going out to run around in the neighborhood and so on into sort of a game-like experience where you can gather up points and further incentivize yourself to get off the couch and actually go do that. So those were a couple of examples that have been we've been working with folks on as a result of our codathons. Similar kinds of things will be coming up on the Applications for Good website where there's online collaboration as well as in the contest that we're putting on this year. The only last point I'll mention, we can talk about a little bit more later, is that one approach we've been taking with our codathons is actually gamifying the codathons themselves. So creating things like the built-in incentives, the countdown clock where, there are deadlines over a short period of time, the community and social collaboration that you have happening on lots of games today. These kinds of things we're trying to implement to sort of gamify the codathons themselves to inject that sort of that feeling and environment in the work that we're doing. I'll pause there and we'll move on, and I'll gladly continue the conversation.
Just hope Tap Cloud doesn't lead to anyone getting run over in the
Let's hope. It's sort of kind of funny how they were all looking at their devices there.
Okay. Is there a clicker? No, I think you have to just tell them to click. It's a human clicker.
Great. Okay. So again, my name is Derek Lomas. I'm also a graduate student at Carnegie Mellon University in Human Computer Interactions, and I study learning science. So I've got a fellowship from the Institute for Education Sciences. So this is a $10 computer. I came across them when I was living in India in 2007, 2008. I thought it was a scam. Someone tries to sell you well, they initially tried to sell me a $15 computer, but I've learned you've got a bargain. Eventually I got one. Yeah. Eventually I got one, took it home, tried it out. It comes with 2 game controllers, a mouse, 2 cartridges, and a connector to the television. That's the screen. So on the back you can see it's got, right, thanks, Benna. So it's got a connection to the television here, and then you plug a cartridge into the top. This is an 8-bit device, okay? So I need to convince you that obsolete technology is relevant in our line of work. Because if we're trying to reach people from disadvantaged backgrounds, we need to think about the platforms that they're using. And it's not a MacBook Pro. This is what I'd call the post-digital divide. The digital divide has largely been crossed. No longer can we say statistics like half the world has not made a phone call. Not only have they made a phone call, they've used a smartphone, et cetera, et cetera. But the technology they have access to is markedly different from the technology that we're familiar with. And so we need to think backwards a little bit. And we need to think about the kinds of platforms that they have access to and the kinds of content that we feel would make for enriching valuable experiences for them. So Play Power is oriented around economically transformative games. So with this platform, there's a few things that struck me initially as being potentially economically transformative about an 8-bit computer. Obviously, they're not going to be accessing anything on the internet. There's huge technological constraints for creating content on this. This is equivalent to an Apple II. But I grew up with an Apple II computer, so gosh darn it. So there were some great learning games on the Apple II for learning typing, for learning math. Number Munchers was a great game. Carmen Sandiego, a geography game. So those served as inspirations for starting this. So I just want to go through a couple slides here. First of all, to show this is from a study that we did in India in 2010 with 3 of the games that we developed. We developed a typing game called Hanuman Typing Warrior, which is about the story of Hanuman, who is a deity. Hinduism is a pretty tolerant religion, and there's a cartoon character, Hanuman, and actually the game idea came from a set of workshops that we ran in India. These ideas came from Indian students who came to our workshop and helped ideate through these games. And the idea is that most games are made for Americans and Europeans. There's very, very few video games made for common people in India or other developing countries. So by taking a character that's on television for millions and important to these people, and respectfully interpreting the cultural narratives in these societies, there's some great game mechanics there. So this particular story is about Hanuman searching for a medicine that will save Lord Lakshman's life, who's been attacked by Ravenna. And he needs to travel to this faraway mountain and find this medicine. So in the game, students, they type the story, and it progresses the character. He encounters different obstacles and has to beat them. If you don't type fast enough, they strike back, and it's an engaging game. And you get to the end, and in the story, he couldn't find the medicine, and so he picks up the whole mountain and flies it back. So at the end of the game, you've got to type fast enough to lift the mountain into the air against the force of gravity, and then you've beaten the game. So if you could progress through some of the slides, it'd be great. Does this work?
Are you typing words? Is that how the game mechanic is working?
It does work.
Are you typing words?
You're typing words, yeah. And what's interesting is that even if the students don't know English, many of the students in our study didn't know English, they still had learned the English alphabet. And so learning to type words that they don't understand is of arguable value. But part of our approach is just in being able to master the keyboard, the kinds of self-confidence that comes from being able to use a keyboard when they find themselves in an internet cafe later is relatively likely, their confidence around the computer is likely to be a lot higher. Similarly, each of these computers, I can just show the other places where this is sold. So this is in Nicaragua, this is in Pakistan. A little worried about the gun that comes with this. Don't worry, it's for a duck hunt, but still. So we estimate that millions of children are buying these, or their parents are buying these each year. What's great about a home platform on a television is that a television is actually a woman's domain. Women spend a lot of time in the home, and they watch a lot of soaps, and the difference between a platform that uses a television versus a laptop, which is much more likely to be fully male-dominated, we found that girls had a significant amount of access on the device. And there's also things to consider like arcades. These are social environments. Just like the family room, you have multiple people playing these games. And there's tons of these little arcades. This is in Dharavi, which is the largest slum in Asia. And these are 1 rupee arcade games. That's 2 cents. You see these kids are popping in because they love to play games. Well, what if we could do an intervention where we put some content in there in addition to the games that they'd play? It seems to me like an opportunity to preload content onto hardware that kids will explore. So this is something that I'm most excited about. So all of these $10 computers come with basic programming. If you buy a new MacBook Pro, what kinds of challenges do you have to go through before you can start programming? It's pretty difficult. You've got to download an IDE and everything else. But on this platform, literally within 2 clicks of the mouse, you can be programming in BASIC. And it's a version of BASIC that manipulates sprites, so you can actually create these little mini games. And so what we're trying to do with the manufacturers is provide content that they can include, just a couple sheets of paper, that has some sample code that kids can type in, and then they will have programmed before. And then when they have later opportunities to program, to develop their computer skills, they will think back, they have programmed before. And so this is the type of market intervention that we're trying to create, not just for this particular platform, but for all kinds of low-cost technologies. We've got an opportunity now to create a portfolio of content and put it on classmate PCs, so it could be preloaded at the point of manufacture. I think every computer in the world is sold with a games folder, but there's only 2 games in the folder, Solitaire and Minesweeper. If there were an educational games folder in that games folder, it could reach millions of kids. So I'll just finish up here. This is our kind of model. We want to package up abandonware. This whole $10 computer market and much of the software market in these countries is based on piracy. But the thing is that they're selling software for platforms that the original publishers don't sell the software for anymore. You can't go buy a legitimate Nintendo cartridge, but you can buy the pirated version. But if an organization wants to use that old abandoned content, they've got incredible legal liability. So we'd like to see a better intellectual property environment where we'd be able to use Pentium 2 software freely without the risk of litigation. We're also creating our own games. We're approaching manufacturers and distributors, and we're taking advantage of existing distribution networks, because distribution is the hardest nut to crack. So, and then we can get it into the hands of families. So these are the 3 games. We've also created a malaria game. I should say we're in the midst of creating this malaria game. Turns out malaria is great as a game mechanic, because you've got to repeatedly kill lots of enemies over and over again. And there's great little things we can add to that game mechanic, like protection with bed nets and different kinds of preventative approaches. So, just to sum up, or to end here, the biggest challenge in this entire space, of course, is funding. Funding is extremely difficult. NSF doesn't fund anything overseas. Trying to do research overseas is difficult enough in itself. But I would just pose it to the audience that in most societies, we expect the government to pay for education, at least in the primary years. And this is something that I think requires some kind of international collaboration around the creation of digital educational content. Because there's no agencies that are really funding digital educational content. And it's great to make these little prototypes and everything else, but until there's a real market, until you can have small businesses that's creating innovative content and has a market for distributing this stuff to, it's extremely difficult space. So that's the end. So thank you.
That was great. Okay. So let's jump in. That was a pretty inspiring little talk. On it, I just want to ask you a couple of questions there. Who makes this? who's the actual manufacturer?
There's actually dozens of manufacturers of this.
Okay.
And the original manufacturer, so this is based on the 8-bit 6502 chip. It's been around since the 80s. Nintendo, Apple, Commodore 64, they all use this 6502 chip. But now, again, the hardware is actually in the public domain since the patents have expired, and so there's dozens of manufacturers.
So there's also these ideas around, there's game mechanics in everything, in all aspects of life. And so that's one of the kind of key insights in social gaming that I was able to learn from a lot of people who are much smarter than I am. In many ways we're driven by those incentives. And one of the first things I thought about when I saw this was, the accessories like the gun and so on, the attachments could actually be, you could create new ones that you have to earn. Right, so you could actually institute game mechanics because the game mechanics don't have to actually just be in the digital space. They can actually be in the physical space, so that you can earn a new gun or a new attachment to this device. And I think that's quite interesting, because there's the idea of earning the virtual goods, and then there's the actual earning of physical goods. The other thing I thought was really insightful was around the women's space, and that's a key difference that I haven't actually seen before, and I'd like to dig into that a little bit more, of how you think that could be leveraged. And the first thing I thought there was around actually making this a microfinance type of business, that women, instead of these kind of electronic shops, it's women selling these, and they begin to spread the games as well, so they actually earn things by helping to get these distributed, and then the follow-up with the children and the mothers, and all of that could create quite an interesting network. And then the final comment is, I just came back from Uganda. I was there with Invisible Children, and I was in the middle of this village in the middle of nowhere. And there was a little baby who was, is not more than 1.5 or 2 years old, and he grabbed my friend's camera, and digital camera, and he wanted to play with the digital camera. But when he took the camera, it was in the middle of nowhere. He took the camera. The first thing he did with it was this, right? And to him, that was such a moment of clarity for me, that we're in the middle of nowhere in Gulu, in this extremely poor village, and that little 2-year-old sees a digital camera as a mobile phone. And so that's the only aspect of this that I question, and I want to kind of open it up for discussion, as should your energy and the creative talents of people in this industry be focused on mobile as the platform for computing, because these are the Apple IIs of this generation of the entire world. And this is obviously the most advanced one, but essentially in the next 5 to 10 years, this will have more computing power than our current computers. And so, does it make sense to just focus all your talent on mobile as a platform, or this kind of 8-bit model?
Well, just to clarify, we're doing both. So we're also developing a set of games. We actually recently won the National STEM Game Competition for a set of games that we'll be releasing later this summer on the iPad and iPhone.
Okay.
One of the challenges with low-end mobile phones is there's so many different platforms, so you can only create for one platform at a time, and it's expensive. So here, at least, the platform's all the same. But yeah, I mean, use what's out there. I want to riff on something you're saying about the 2-year-old using the technology.
Yeah.
I've got a 2-year-old, and man, does he use technology. And I think it's something to consider, just kind of how, yeah, sure, I had Apple IIs growing up and everything, but it's extended so much younger, and it's such an informal space. I don't know. The mobile phones certainly are used by every parent in the world to get their kid to be quiet for a minute. So
what's interesting though is that mobile phones, in terms of UI and user experience, there's been an incredible advance in the last, since really the iPhone came about in terms of actual usability. And so you look at, my little nephew also is around 2, and I got him an iPod Touch. It was the same interface as an iPhone. And in a matter of minutes, he had mastered the entire thing. I mean, he was playing every single game that, some that I had created, some that he was interested in, and that's exactly right. And there's kind of the idea that the actual advances in the soft areas of user experience have untapped potential for spreading and democratizing kind of access, not just in terms of demographic access to technology, but also by age. I mean, the earlier you can reach a child to use that kind of technology, the more transformational that is for their lives, because it's part of the fabric of their lives from the very beginning.
It's the notion of touch, really, I think, in that user experience on the iPhone that makes it so accessible to younger ages. I mean, I'll do you one better. When I was on a flight with my, at the time, 6-month-old baby, I got him to be engaged for a little while by just loading up the photos on my iPhone, and he immediately was scrolling through the phones himself at 6 months of age. But that's not unlike many other children's toys where there's things to slide and move around and all that, and it's just a tactile kind of thing that I think is inherently part of a child's development, at least from my own meager observations on that. I think that's the thing that makes it so accessible. I also wanted to respond real quick to your thought about what platform should we be programming for, operating on. I mean, I think I tend to agree with you, Derek, that I think there's room and need to continue to work on a wide variety of platforms. I think anyone would be remiss to ignore the mobile space for sure right now, especially if you look at stats in this country that I showed up there, but clearly around the world, access to mobile devices is far greater than the internet for getting information out and across between folks. But it's not always the latest technology. Certainly in this country, households 35,000 and under are about 80% still on feature phones rather than smartphones, and so if you want to be effective in communicating in that space, you need to consider that. I also like to think about it in terms of using the right tool for the job. Mobile isn't great for everything or as good as other platforms for everything. I think the notion of the television, a central hub in the home where the family can gather around and do certain things, is a really important notion that doesn't happen as readily on a mobile platform. Same thing with a computer accessing the internet. I wish everyone could access the internet because there are certain things that's going to be way better at. In the realm of the kinds of things One Economy works on, for example, in family budgeting, we've created a family budget tool many years ago, and that's ideally suited to be created on a computer or access to the internet and so on. But if you want to track your spending on a day-to-day basis, a mobile device is going to be the right tool for the job. You got it with you everywhere you go. Some cases, there's places where you've got to go with what's available, and that's an important factor. In other places where you have more platforms available, it's really a matter of thinking about what the right tool for the job is.
But also, I mean, you could look at things like, the world being a platform, like what you said, making that link between what you do in the game to the real world, or like using the example of having the women distribute the computer. I mean, we had a discussion this morning about that. I mean, I guess there's some elements that we wouldn't want to include, like the toll road example. I think that could be like chaos. But there's other examples, like when people plant trees through WeMonster, and then they get to pick where the trees are planted. They get to see where the projects are on the ground where the trees are planted. And for those projects are then providing jobs for people in places where there may not have been many jobs for them. So you've got a whole community and economy that are starting to build around where the trees are planted. So then you have that impact to people who are being impacted through the game or through the device, but may not necessarily have played the game or used the device, but it's still part of that game mechanic in a social way.
So one of the things is so I just go back to mobile as a platform, just to dig in a little bit more on it. The cost of this device is going to exponentially go down over the next 5 years. So I actually think the arguments about, you know, feature phones and smartphones and all of that's going to go away. It's going to wash away. And the reason is that, you know, it's obvious that what the superior experience is. And so what will happen is this will begin to go down market and across the whole world. And so there will be billions of these types of phones which could be platforms. One of the things I'll add, and it was a key insight from both of you, is this platform. I did a couple of games where I wanted to connect this to larger screens, right? So we figured out how to do multiplayer games over 3G without a Wi-Fi connection. And what we did was we then spread the actual game to a wider screen like initially your computer, but there's no reason why that couldn't actually happen on a television screen as well. And we were doing, you know, Wii-style games where you're bowling and you swing this and hopefully you don't throw it into your television. But the idea was this becoming a controller for your experiences on wider screens. So one thing I would urge you, to do is maybe ideate a little bit around how you could take what that's doing and have it happen on a mobile phone. Obviously, in terms of in the future, I mean, it's going to take some time for it to spread. But I like the idea of it connecting to the television, where, like you said, in India, it's more of the women's space. So it'll be interesting to see how would that change the dynamic if the mobile phone is interacting and being the platform rather than that keyboard. You can actually connect the wires. There's special wires you can connect this to a TV and then spread and have the games be controlled that way.
You might notice, I think the next platform to be as widely available at this price point for the populations that we're targeting are those Wii knockoffs. You may have seen them already in like CVS and different drugstores for $20, $25.
Yeah.
You can buy a gaming platform that's got sort of Wii dynamics. So the costs are hardware costs are increasingly not the issue, but it's still a question of what kind of content do we want to have available.
Right.
And there's not. I mean, what are the killer apps so far? I mean, what are the apps that like need to be there? I think that I don't know. Do you have any ideas of what?
I think that's a good thing to dig in a little bit, because this is my continuous concern about serious games is games need to be fun. Even the name serious games takes the fun out of the game, right? So I'd like to rebrand serious games if I could. So the issue I have, and I've been in a lot of different sessions, I've met with, Queen Rania wanted to do a game that was a classroom, and my advice there was that if the game isn't fun, no one's going to stay. Regardless of how lofty the goals are, you have to realize that the game needs to be extremely fun, and that the reason people play games is to escape their lives, right? To escape the problems of their lives. And so the fundamental question I have, and I'd like you guys to address this, is how do you build games that could actually scale to a size of Angry Birds or a Farmville when you want to teach people, but they're trying to escape from the problems of their lives? Dig into the dichotomy for me a little bit.
We've come across this problem a lot. And I think what it is, it's you have people moving into the serious game space that might not have come from a games background. So a few years ago, there's always been this kind of debate about the name serious games, and nobody seems to like it, but everybody still seems to use it. We dropped it ages ago. But one of the things that we found really important is to look at the game. You know what the content should be, and you know what the objectives should be if you want to build a serious game. But the hard bit is then looking at the fun. So who is it you're targeting? What platforms are they going to be using? What's going to get them engaged? And then how do you take some of those mechanics from the content and build them into game mechanics? And we changed the business slightly, where we brought in an advisory board of a lot of great games people from like IDOS Games and Kuju Games, and basically so we can start tapping into the whole entertainment side. So rather than kind of looking at serious games, because we'd spent years going to serious games events and workshops, we started just purely focusing on entertainment games because we knew how to do the serious bit. It was just the entertaining bit. And that seemed to work really well. And our game, We Monster, changed a lot as well. Before it was very kind of you do this to achieve this. But now it's a fun to play game with a storyline built in it. It's a South American Mayan themed game. You have a pet monster. The monster's like 10 times bigger than the Mayan characters. It's all quite fun and quirky. And there's very kind of fantastical, magical creatures in the game, like fairies and unicorns. So we made it very non-real life, but the game mechanics built in are very real life. So the more trees you have, the more clouds equal rain. The clouds deflect the sun, the rain waters the plants. But then you also have eco points in the game as well, because you have to balance the whole the eco cycle.
So let me challenge you on that. So my concern is that many times we think as game designers that having 3D or fun-looking characters and cute characters suffices for entertainment and fun, and I think that's the mistake that most developers run into, and they hit a brick wall. And you know, what I sometimes think is it's such a shame because there's so much creative talent that gets wasted on building things that ultimately don't succeed in their goals. And when you look at some of these games like Farmville that are making billions of dollars in revenue now, Zynga is making over $2 billion plus in revenue, and it only was created 3 years ago. So the scale at which people are engaged and spending money inside of these environments is absolutely phenomenal and incredible. But at the same time, you feel, well, what good is it doing in the world? Because on Facebook, people spend 44,000 years a day on Facebook now. Just think about that for a second. 44,000 years of time is spent every day on Facebook, and much of that is on social games. And so harvesting that time is, I think, a challenge of our generation to figure out how do you turn that into something that does more good for the world. And obviously they're doing things like selling seeds for Haiti, and they've raised $2 million, but $2 million against $2 billion in revenue and profits it doesn't really do the job. So that's my challenge. It's like, when you look at a game like Farmville, it doesn't have those whiz-bang features. And part of the problem is that the knowledge in terms of the number of people in the world that know how to build those types of games is probably less than 250 people who truly understand how to build those game mechanics. And it all is based on mathematics. It's based on the recruitment of PhDs, mathematicians, physicists. So much science goes into it, you would be shocked. I mean, the dashboards and the analytics and the metrics. And so that's where I think the untapped potential is that we don't have the marriage of creativity and science coming together to do what companies like Zynga are doing, but do it for changing the world.
So that's we're launching our games on BrainPop this summer, and we've got a system that allows us to run different experimental conditions of the game. So in one version of the game, we've created it's called Battleship Number Line, and you're trying to sink submarines and battleships by estimating numbers on a number line. And we've got all these questions that come up during the design process, like how tick marks on the number line affect students' performance. Maybe they do better, but they don't learn as much, etc. And there's literally dozens of different changes to the design that we think will have an impact. And so the system that we're building allows us, once we have an online population that we're getting through this teacher-oriented site, BrainPop, we'll be able to randomly assign different groups of players to different game conditions. And because we've got embedded assessments within the games, we're able to measure learning within the games and the amount of time on task. So this kind of infrastructure, I think, is really important because everybody needs metrics for evaluation. Everyone needs to demonstrate the impact that they're making. It's one of the things that, is the reason why I'm not only focusing on this platform, because it's extremely difficult to get metrics about performance for things that are out in the world. But when you're using mobile platforms and when you're using online platforms, you're able to collect an enormous amount of data, and that data can be used to argue for your impact, argue for further funding, but also be used to improve the games in an iterative process. And I'll throw out one other salvo towards funding, which is that it's never iterative. They always give you the money, and then they hardly look at what you made at the end of it anyway, and then there's no room for iteration. And so there's so many experiments, so many things that have been made, but there's never any realization of the fact that there's always lessons learned, and there's such a need for iteration. Yeah. The platforms change, the trends change, so many things change. Unless there's products created and a secondary cycle that allows them to improve, I think it would be dumb luck for things to be super successful.
That's an extremely important point, Derek. I think one of the things we talk about is it's okay to fail as long as you're failing fast, right? Just fail fast, and iteratively you'll get to some kind of aspect of success, right? And so on the point of the incentives, part of what you're talking about is just giving a developer or a company a grant or money is probably going to guarantee failure, right? You want to have more incentive-based ways of actually creating these companies. That's more of like a Y Combinator model, right? Because there's nothing wrong with doing well while you're doing good, right? So that's so finding a Y Combinator kind of, maybe you could touch on some of the coding contests that you do and what you've learned from that, both from its successes and failures.
Well, we're barely sticking our toe in the water at this point, so I don't know that we have a lot of history to report on. I just wanted to touch on this larger point that I think you're making. I'm not sure, as great as it would be, that the goal should necessarily be create a serious game or a purpose-based game that is as successful as Farmville or can compete with what I'm playing on my Xbox or something like that for amount of fun or amount of time even I want to spend on it. I think in the public purpose space, I think there's a lot of different things that provide incentives for folks. And I think all of those things need to be looked at because you're talking about needing to escape from everyday problems, and that is, I'm sure, a big impetus for a lot of people playing games, to not worry about the bills or not worry about school or not worry about something. But I think there are times when people do face up to the realities of life. Maybe it's a slightly older demographic, but for us and the people we work with, sure, it's no fun worrying about the debt collector or worrying about your diabetes or your special needs child. But there are things that you do have motivations to work on, and if we can find ways to help people work through those issues that they're already motivated or near motivated to deal with in a way that is more enjoyable, that's more accessible, I think that's a really laudable goal and something that should be spent more time. The two things I showed, I'm not taking credit for either of those things, but I think they're really nice examples. There's a million health apps out there, a million health games out there, and from Wii Fit on down the line to mobile things. Anything that just helps your daily run be a little bit more fun, gives you that extra little bit or some social aspect of it to where, you're showing off to your friends how far you went or what points you gained. I think that's an important goal, and it's not always necessarily that this has to be the direct competition with the most popular game out there, I
don't think anyone is saying to be, create a serious game that is the same scale as Angry Birds or
would be great though.
Or Farmville. It would be great. I mean, maybe one person will do is kind of winning the lottery, but I do think I think it's a false premise, though, to compromise engagement goals just because you're trying to do some good. I think that's a false premise, and I think just compromising to the point of saying, oh, we've got these goals and we're gonna use standards that the best in class in the world would use to create products is not acceptable. I think that's a false premise, and I think it's probably the reason why the framework for creating most of these types of experiences has led to suboptimal results. So, on that challenge, what would you suggest as solutions to creating incentives for developers to create more world-class experiences for users in this space?
Well, I think in some cases, as dumb as this answer may sound, I think there are built-in incentives in doing good. I think in our own organization, just to broaden it out a little bit one more time, I mean, we've attracted a lot of really smart people to work with us who have come from really lots of top-of-market companies around the world and said, my own psyche tells me it's time I do something a little different, do something that I go home and feel good about. And I think in the developer space, there's a lot of folks for whom they're sort of toiling away for this company or on their own or what have you, doing things that to the rest of the world are very complicated, and their friends or their family don't really understand what it is they're doing behind the scenes or how it works, and they're not getting full credit for the incredible nature of what it is they're working on a day-to-day basis and how impressive it is and how hard it is to do. And given an opportunity to create an application or create a game that they can point to and say, I'm affecting global warming, or I'm helping people to lose weight or something like that, they can show their mother, their grandmother, their girlfriend, or whatever it happens to be, I think is a pretty darn strong incentive in and of itself. And I think our experience, you're asking about our experience with contests and things like that, yes, there are cash prizes and grand prizes and all that, but we're finding out that folks are getting as much enjoyment and satisfaction out of the codathons without those prizes, getting together with people and working on real problems, as they would driving toward, a $5,000 cash prize or something like that.
Yeah. So we're going, we're just at an hour, so I think it's a good time to stop and take some questions from the audience. And let's make this a real conversation. Just don't be shy, come up and ask questions, and if you don't have a question but you have a statement, make a statement. Come up to the mic, please.
We don't want to hear from this particular individual, actually. Raul Bull, my predecessor running media at One Economy Corporation.
Yes. One of the things that I've been hearing about this whole conference has been, obviously, the serious games are focused on affecting a particular objective in the world. Like, we as a game creator have an idea of how we want to affect the world. And then we're actually bringing up the sort of where is that creativity, where is that art that comes to it. The one thing that's just sort of missing in the conversation is the audience. And you started talking a little bit about fun, right?
Yeah.
And actually being an enjoyable part of it. That's kind of coming up in some of the tweets around the conference. I'm wondering about how each of you approach understanding what the audience wants and the iterative nature of incorporating that back into your game development, even though there are constraints by funders and others. And being a funder now, I understand those constraints. Thanks.
So there's some incredible feedback loops that you want to measure, and without measurement, you're completely flying blind especially in social game development. In the past, games were not connected, so there wasn't any data you could get from the actual users once your game went live. You could do it through tests and watch people and videotape them and while they play in your labs and so on. But once we were able to get it onto Facebook, we began to get a stream of incredibly valuable data based on every single click, every single pixel, every single action we were able to measure. And what you do from that is you see what users like and what they don't like, what engages them, what it doesn't engage them. And in the stream of those interactions, the ultimate goal for these game companies has been leading people to buy virtual goods. And if you replace that with leading people to take their pills on time, exercise, all of those actionable transactions that can be measurable, then you create a model that could measure those engagements in the right way. Yeah.
Also, just a little further though, what about when you started the game? How much did you and your company look at talking with the audience in the core creative concept?
So when I first started SGN, I thought that just having the creative ideas was enough. That you're going to come up with some amazing idea and the world's going to fall in love with it. And I found that's not really, unfortunately, true. It's idealistic. The most successful companies have basically copied what already works and essentially cloned. If you looked at Mafia Wars, it was a clone of a game from a developer that worked for me who created Mob Wars. And it's such a clone that he ended up suing them and settling. So mostly kind of taking things that are already working and incrementally improving it through those kinds of iterative tests. A/B tests is what we call it.
Yeah, we always do audience testing before a touch of code is touched. So kind of like what Ben Sawyer was saying this morning, do as much as you can on paper before you start coding. So for example, when we were creating the concept for Red Mist, we went out we knew the audience were going to be kids about 14 to 19, and we went to a lot of youth centres and prisons and did work with kids and we got them to help kind of storyboard out what the game would look like, took back the storyboard images. We'd run through the game design with them, so we're getting their feedback as well as them being involved in how the game would look and feel and play out. And we did the same also with, we do it with all of our games, but with WeMonster, because we weren't quite sure of exactly who that demographic would be. We put a sign-up form online last year and got about 200 people signed up, and we took them through the initial couple of prototypes that we had of the game. And now we've got a few hundred people signed up to do the beta testing. So we always kind of iterate with the audience and go back to them, and that helps shape the idea.
Do you guys want to cover it?
Sure. I mean, for us, and again, games is just a tiny piece of what we're working on. But in the space of just general content development, application development, and so on. As I said at the outset, for us, a big part of this is trying to bring some of that community-based intel to the folks who are going to create the applications and do the development, thinking that we are, through our community-based work over the last decade, are a little more in tune than the broader development community. That may or may not be true for any given developer, but we have a lot of different tentacles into the community through different on-the-ground programs we're running in partnerships with nonprofit organizations, and especially of late with our application development process, we're taking real case studies, real focus group results, real survey results, and massaging that into sort of one-pagers, white-pagers, and so on that become foundations for need statements about what might be developed. We don't take it so far as to then say this is how it should be developed, this becomes the idea, or anything like that. We leave it to the individual developers to sort of follow that through, but we feel like if we can percolate up what our real and specific community needs, we'll be doing a service to this process.
So just real quickly, we did a series of workshops in India and Brazil to come up with our games. We also did a 40-family ethnographic design study in India, and from that we found out that what the kids wanted in the malaria game was to use the light gun to shoot the mosquitoes. And I'm pretty sure that if we followed their advice, it would be a really popular game. I don't know if the funders would go for it.
Even Bill Gates did that at TED. He zapped the mosquitoes with lasers. That's great.
So I want to challenge one assumption that I heard here about games have to be fun. Okay. First of all, playing games even before digital games, I had some chess games that were not fun at all. Super frustrating, very challenging. So I'm wondering if there's another word there that is maybe more, accurate for what we're doing to players when we communicate with them. And I think that that leads to my question that I would like to hear your comments on. If we're really becoming a mature media and becoming a bit more than entertainment, can we see games that will make you cry? And can we see games that will make you sweat or, think really hard about something or change your perspective? Just like, we have documentaries with objectives that do that. We have books with objectives that do that.
Games make me cry. There's a lot of people that cry and also in frustration probably cry at games. So on the chess point, you could stay at the mic for a second. Why did you play the chess game?
I think it was a lot about the competition, and I think it was a lot about making progress and level up. There was nothing in looking back at that experience, there was nothing that I could say. It was just like this pure fun thing that, we used to think and to equate games with.
So what you're touching on is another emotion that's aspirational. You were aspiring to be amongst the best chess players. And so in kind of the vectors of what makes people play games, the aspirational aspect is a really incredible human mechanic that's in all of our lives. Like every single goal we have in our own lives is some fabric of our innate desire to be something, to want something, to be a part of some experience. I don't think that the aspirational side is that different than the fun side, especially if you actually achieve your objective.
There's something even what seems like one step below the aspirational, which is this momentum that seems to get created on especially on some of the social games that we've all seen on Facebook and so on. Not to out
progress, right?
Yeah, my poor
progress.
wife. It's like she looks at these games like chores. It's like she's got to get online and do such and accomplish these 4 things before she can go to bed at night. It's like, why do you continue to do this? She's clearly not sitting there having great fun. It doesn't even really seem that aspirational. It's like she must continue.
Right.
There's I don't know what human nature about the momentum, but that seems to be part of it as well.
That's a good. Look, momentum, progress. Aspirations don't have to be lofty, right?
Right.
So, could you repeat the other part of your question? Because I got focused on your chess point, and it was a really good one.
The last thing you said, I would say that it sounds like great therapy, like progress and aspiration, and so that's one point. My other point was around media. So can games get to the point?
Oh, yeah.
We really look at them like movies. That there is a range of emotions,
yes,
range of audiences, and it's not only, again, fun for young adults.
My heart was broken in my SGN experience, and I love the experience, the company, and all of that. But the reason it was broken is that I went in with a very lofty goal of creating the Pixar of social games. That was my goal. I wanted to create the Pixar of social games that would make people have those experiences that you would have coming out of, Toy Story and all of the great Pixar movies. And what I found was either the market's not ready for that yet. The current market, as you were talking about with your wife's experience, is very focused on very discrete experiences and achievements. And so the room for these kind of inspirational, unbelievable experiences is not yet tapped. I don't think that means it will never happen. I just think that the current market and what people are occupying themselves and what's working hasn't yet happened. That doesn't mean that there isn't a 17-year-old entrepreneur in the garage in Moscow coming up with the exact mechanic to make, Chessville. So.
That sounds awful.
So let's keep.
If you don't think games can make people cry, you haven't seen the Pittsburgh Steelers lose a game.
No, I think they can make it.
But the key insight in social games, and I think this is was the reason I did it and a couple of other people did it early, was that we realized that people are lonely. and that in Facebook, in the social graph, we could actually make people play games together again in the same way that we did when we were children. And that experience of being with other people was a really, really amazing experience. And so communities of people have been created that are so interconnected together now, so bonded, even though they've never met. And I think that's probably one aspect of kind of adding the social to learning. I think there's so much untapped potential in social learning and games coming together in a way that is beautiful, but yet also doesn't miss the ability to learn from the analytics and metrics and the mathematics that it takes to really iterate and learn rather than just throwing up a beautiful idea.
I would just add, we delve a little bit into in the creation of other forms of media as well, and I've tapped folks in Hollywood to create web-episodic series and now a feature film. Sort of observing that process, we've largely been creating dramatic storylines that do make people cry. Observing that process gives me a real appreciation for the very careful calibration and the synergy of elements that need to come together just right to create that emotion. The best filmmakers in the world, really know how to do that well, when to have the music soar up and what's the exact right dialogue and the right framing of the picture and the right character traits of the people you're watching that create that emotional connection. And I think, boy, what a big challenge that would be to incorporate that into a scenario where the outcome is not preordained, such as games where things are happening as they happen. If I'm gathering your question correctly, I think there's lots of different emotions that can happen as a result of a game: the competitiveness, the frustration, the joy, the accomplishment, all those sorts of things. But to create those kinds of emotions in the same way that you would in a great documentary or a great dramatic film or something like that seems tough. I don't disagree with you. I think it's possible, but it seems pretty tough.
Well, I've heard games like Purple Rain have made people cry. But I think also by looking at technology you can use like NeuroSky, like what we've used with Red Mist, it's just a really kind of different, interesting way of being able to use emotions in games. So you're basically tracking people's emotions, and at the end of playing the game, you can see like a chart of where the different emotions kicked in. And I think that sort of thing could be really helpful for kind of youth workers who we met with and spoke to for our research, to speak to them about, will this help you understand young people's behaviour and understand what triggers off different types of emotions within the games. But again, it's a very kind of simple, basic level, but it's just an interesting piece of technology and way of looking at emotions in games.
Awesome. Is there one final question?
And
perfect.
It's directed to you, Shervin. As a professional game developer, he'd like to know how you compare the success of regular games to serious games. Is it a matter of the concepts not being attractive, not enough investment or revenue, or is it that a didactical approach doesn't work well?
It's a great question. I believe that I think that the serious game space is going to take it's going to take a great entrepreneur to get involved, a series of great entrepreneurs on the level of a Mark Pincus, the founder of Zynga, to really start getting engaged. And one of the things I got really excited about is that one of those great entrepreneurs, and I don't count myself in that category, is a guy named Michael Birch, who was the founder of Bebo. And he sold Bebo for something like $800 million. And he started to code for a nonprofit called Charity Water. And what he's built, the platform that he built, was around birthdays. And if you think about birthdays and gifts and people saying happy birthday and singing songs, it's a little mini game in our lives, right? It's the birthdays are a game, and there's a number to it every year that we advance and we progress, and that's kind of like a score of how many years we've lived on this planet, and the number of friends that give us cards and say happy birthday at least, or give us a gift, is measurable and meaningful. Having a birthday that no one remembers is incredibly sad in many people's lives. And so he's focused on birthdays from the very beginning. He did Birthday Alarm and sold it, then bought it back. He sold Bebo, and now he's involved in people buying it back, and the people that actually bought it back. And so what he did for Charity Water, he coded over a number of weeks. That has led to raising something on the order of $10 million in less than a year and a half. I gave my birthday up for Charity Water, and I raised $45,000 in 24 hours from my friends on Facebook. And that was, awesome. I mean, I was checking that number like every hour. It was like I was putting stuff on. It was a game to me. I was like, I wanted to raise $37,000 for my 37th birthday this year in March. And I'd just gone to Ethiopia, was just with Charity Water. I was so inspired. I was like, I need to hit this number. It was totally a game. Okay? I was driven. You talk about, and I was also crying after it hit the number. I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I did it. But it was so awesome. To me, to hit the number and then have it go beyond the number was like, I get goose pimples right now thinking about it. I'm like, oh my God, the 2,000 people are going to get water in their lives that they don't have access to clean water. It's going to build all these wells. That was a game. And I accomplished my objective, my aspirational objective, and it was so much fun. I had so much fun doing it, and other people are doing the same thing. And so Michael, back to the question, was basically saying, but that's not enough. And that's the way he is. The way he thinks is like, it's kind of bored now. He's bored with it. He's like, okay, well, that was interesting. What's next? And his goal is, how do I raise $1 billion to solve the access to water problem? And I just got the email from him literally as I was walking in. He's launched an idea called Water Forward. And it's a brilliant mechanic. And I suggest all of you go search Water Forward, Charity Water, etc. And what it does is it creates a book that only, I think, 500 people that kind of are the founders of this book. And it will be a physical book. And again, back to the aspirational. What you do is you sponsor, I think, a number of friends. Let's say 5 or 10 friends. So the only way you get into this book is you donate money for Charity Water, and you sponsor 5 friends. They then have to sponsor another 5 friends, right? And so I think what we get lost in, I think that my suggestion for this space is it's not the characters or the cute games or anything like that I think is where the value lies. It's really in these viral mechanics that touch on what people's souls and aspirations are. And I think Michael will hit his goal with Water Forward. I think he's gonna raise an incredible amount of money for Charity Water doing this. And I think having an entrepreneur like him start to think about this is amazing. We were on a beach together at this little gathering, and he said, Shervin, I want to build a game like Farmville, but to raise money, to raise incredible amounts of money for a cause. And so now I'm starting to help him think about that. But to have the DNA of someone like Michael Birch involved, I think will create a massive cascading effect on the space, because, in the same way that Mark Pincus with Zynga has helped inspire thousands of other social game entrepreneurs, we need a phenomenal game. I know we made the point about Farmville, but we need games and mechanics and experiences that are so impactful that it inspires thousands of other people to learn, iterate, and code from there. That's my answer to that. So I think we're reaching a 10 to 3, and that was a lot of fun, actually. I had fun, and I want to thank you guys for your contributions. This is a great panel, and those were great questions. And I hope this was meaningful, everyone, and that we all learned something together. Thank you.